This is chapter 3 of my Simple Guide to Solar Power book. It's a very top-level discussion on some of the things you ought to consider before you jump into solar power or not. Again, it's very top-level. It doesn't go into much detail at all, but it just covers some of the issues you ought to really think about before you spend a lot of money on something that you might be sorry you did, or might be the best decision you ever made.
Let's talk for a minute about what your expectations of solar power are, or in other words, what do you want to do with solar power? What do you think it will do for you? It reminds me of a little story back a long time ago when, I don't know if you remember, the old TRS-80 computers that Radio Shack was selling. A lot of you are probably too young for that. But in the day, they were all the rage. Everybody had to have one. So some guy at work went down and bought one. Comes in the next day to work, and then he asked me, "Well, what can I do with this? What should I do with this?" And he'd already bought it. And then I asked him, "Well, what do you want to do with it? What did you buy it for?" And he really didn't know. He just knew that everybody had one, and he had to have one, so he didn't know what to do with it. But in any case, solar power is a little more straightforward than that. However, what it can do for you and what you think it can do for you might be two different things. And you really ought to look at that question first before you actually dive into this and get into solar power and spend a lot of money. Okay, what would you like solar power to do for you? What are your expectations? Are you thinking you might be able to pull the plug on the power company? Do you want to have a bit of extra power to run an extra freezer or something like that? Do you simply want to get your power bills down a bit? What is realistic? Do you want to install a solar thermal system to heat your house? Well, what you were thinking solar power can do and what the reality is might be two different things. Let me see if I can offer you some advice in that area. Like I said before, there are just two basic things that can be done. You can heat something up, or you can convert the photovoltaic directly to electricity. Let's talk about the first one a bit. If you're thinking about putting in a thermal solar system to heat your house in the wintertime, I would advise against that. Solar thermal is where you heat a collector and blow air through it or run water across it and collect the hot water and air and see if you can directly warm your house somehow. The basic reason I advise against trying to do that is during the winter, when it is cold outside, those thermal devices generally don't work very well because of the heat losses out there in the very cold weather. They work great in the summer, heating your domestic water, maybe your swimming pool, and stuff like that. But when it's really cold outside, unless you use some very high-tech and expensive stuff, it just will not work very well. Now, just to be fair here, I'm not talking about like if you have one side of your house that's all a greenhouse or something like that. I'm talking about a solar thermal collector type device, that looks something like a solar panel. I wouldn't go there at all because it's just not going to work for you. But you can heat your house electrically, and it actually does work quite well. Most people don't think about that because, as you may know, anyone who does heat their house electrically during a cold winter has a really high electric bill to show for it. But that's because they are buying all the electric power that's required to heat the house. If a good portion of the power is free because you own solar power equipment and that's producing it, the cost suddenly goes way down. So if you want to use solar to heat your house, think solar voltaic, not solar thermal.